First and Now is back, the official BC Lions podcast, recording on a Tuesday. Matt Baker with Nick Kowalski. He has his nice little vintage Lions helmet in his background there. For those watching this podcast, for those listening, well, you'll just have to take our word for it. Nick, how are you, sir?
Doing good and looking forward to Toronto week coming up here. And yeah, we're in the office that we usually are in Monday to Friday. A little bit of a corporate setting in our little cubicles here, but looking forward to the week ahead.
Yeah, you call this a corporate setting. I suppose it is in more ways than one.
Our room would definitely be the most corporate setting here. I think we have actually the cubicles and they're all laid out, and
yeah,
there's 6 of them in here. Yeah, so that's probably more of the corporate setting here in our office.
I got the private office down the hall, so
yeah
I wouldn't know anything about that. Guys, myself and Stephen Chang are hanging out in the office there. But yes, as you may have figured out by now, we are not at the Go-Goat Sports Studios this week. Practice timing and scheduling got in the way of that. We always love being at the Wall Center. We'll be back in there next week, hopefully, all things considered. But shout out to Go-Goat Sports and Sakaris and Price, the fine folks there. Saw Matt Sakaris at the game on Friday. Well, saw Sakaris and Price. Blake Price doing the sideline work for TSN as Farhan got the promotion to play-by-play for one game anyway. So, yeah, saw the boys a couple times last week, podcast recording and at the game, and it looked like Maddie was making the rounds. Press box, field level, broadcast booth. I always love seeing the guys out supporting the Lions. And it's a Victory Tuesday, Nick. And boys got back to practice today. A nice, clean 34-19. Well, not, no victory is 100% clean. There's certainly stuff that they'll want to fix up, like Rick Campbell said, perhaps defensively and up front quarterback protection. But nice, tidy, double-digit win to get to 10-4, which is a very big deal for this team. Officially locking up a position in the West Division playoffs as a result. Overall, a good win.
Yeah, definitely overall a good win, and I think the game, it wasn't on the scoreboard wrapped up after the first half, but it was a pretty sizable lead. It was 24-6 for the Lions at half, and Vernon Adams was good VA. He was hitting all his throws. He was taking long shots that were all connecting to Dominique Rhymes. Lucky Whitehead got involved a lot there too. And yeah, at the end there, maybe foot got taken off the gas a bit. The yardage allowed, maybe not too ideal, especially through the air with Nick Arbuckle racking up a lot of yards in that term we call garbage time at the end of the game there. But overall, a solid win, and to get the double-digit wins with a month to go in the season is a very big accomplishment. And at the end of the day, we're still in a spot where we control our own destiny if we want to host that Western Final, even though if you look around the league, many are penciling in that spot going to Winnipeg. But we got 2 big games coming up with the Bombers here that could decide that fate that we fall into the playoffs.
Yeah, it's all in the Lions' hands. 4 wins, and they would be first place. As maybe as inconceivable as that may have sounded a couple of weeks ago, after Nathan went down, and you lose a couple in a row off the bat. But the magic number 3 to be second, to clinch a home game, and looking at these remaining schedules, you might have to win 3. Because Calgary's got the bye this week. Then they're home to Hamilton. I'm sorry, I've said it all season long. Can't trust the Ticats. Then they finish with Saskatchewan home and home. So if you're sitting here waiting to see if Calgary's going to drop one, I don't know if that's the way to go. Lions are in control. They keep winning football games. Then that increases the chances week by week. But backtrack to the game here. You mentioned 24-6 at the half. Here's what impressed me. Lions give up a Lewis Ward field goal. 12 seconds left, take the ball up to 40. So you're like, okay, they're going to kneel it down, get the ball to start the second half kickoff. So they'll be content going with a 2-score lead, 21-6. But no, Vernon drops back to pass one, and he hits Keon Hatcher for 39 yards, and there's still time for Sean White to kick a field goal. I like that. That's Rick Campbell sending a message that he believes in these guys to get points. And who knows? Maybe there's going to be a situation down the road here in a game where they have to win to get second, or in a playoff game where they're going to need something like that with a little time left on the clock. And that shows the confidence they can get it done no matter what the circumstances. That, to me, was a very, very impressive note from that win.
Big time. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And we've seen pretty much all season here with Rick Campbell's philosophy, whether it comes to not taking his foot off the gas. We've seen him keep Nathan O'Rourke in, and at times when the game's been on the scoreboard out of reach, and that's because Rick has been in the CFL for a long time, and he states this a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but he knows that with the last 3 minutes having stopped time on the clock, that no lead is safe is the ultimate CFL cliche, and Rick Campbell definitely believes in that. That slogan that the CFL's put on for good reason too. So you never do want to take your foot off the gas, and especially if you have the weapons like Vernon Adams to make a quick play, and you have Keon Hatcher who can get that ball down over the middle, or Dominic Grimes, or whoever it's going to be. Why not take the risk, or not a risk, but why not go out and get 3 more points on the scoreboard? Because who knows, at the end of the game, those points could be the difference, right?
34-19, 10th win of the year. And we turn the page now, another big opportunity. It's Toronto week. And you mentioned the team not taking its foot off the gas. One of those results was game 2, week 3. 44-3 win over the Argonauts at BC Place to start 2-0. And both these teams, I think, are going to look a little bit different since that meeting back on June the 25th. Of course, Nathan Rourke not playing. Brian Burnham is out week by week. We think, nothing official. Lucky Whitehead might get a week off. That was kind of one damper in the Ottawa win, going down with his ankle injury. Tried to come back, didn't quite work. I think that's mostly precautionary with Lucky. A couple of question marks on the defense. Again, it's only one day of practice under their belt when we're recording this. But Josh Banks on the defensive line did not practice Tuesday, hamstring. Emmanuel Rugamba had a bit of a shoulder, bit of a stinger late in the first half. He was not out there on day one. So there might be a couple of moving parts in the secondary on the defensive line, and perhaps the debut of a young American receiver. We'll see what these next couple of days of practice hold. But the Lions are going to have to keep counting on another overused cliche, next man up. But there's definitely a confidence brewing with this offense, especially as Vernon Adams Jr. gets more and more comfortable week by week. Be a good test going into Toronto.
Yeah, in regards to the injury front, Lucky Whitehead's obviously the name that everyone's going to pay attention to, and it's going to be all over the news this week of what his game status is. But Josh Banks and Emmanuel Rugamba, they've kind of been the unsung heroes on defense. They obviously, Rugamba being a first-year CFL player, but Josh Banks, he's done a great job all season. He started every single game, plugging up the middle of the field. Doesn't really show up on the stat sheet a lot, but he definitely gets pressures there too. I think his ability to get interior pressure helps out the edges with David Menard. Matthew Betts really let loose on the edges. So while his status is still up in the air too, at the same time you got a guy like Woody Barron who's now getting back to his 100% stamina and getting more reps at that defensive tackle position too. So that could be a filler there. And we've also seen Quincy Moget at times start some games this year too, and he'd be the presumable replacement if Rugamba can't go in the secondary this week. But Toronto's also dealing with some key defensive injuries that we'll speak more on later in this episode. But Shane Ray out for the season for them. Winton McManus left on crutches last week and Saturday. CFL interception leader Jamal Peters also didn't play on Saturday. So that's also something else to monitor on the other side for the Argonauts and their injuries.
Yeah, two different looking teams potentially. Yeah, Shane Ray, that's a huge blow. Bicep injury, right? And logic would dictate McManus is probably in a little bit of trouble here short term too if you're on crutches. And we've seen McManus, his ability to change games. Was it touchdown Atlantic? He had the pick six, the difference maker there in the fourth quarter to take down Saskatchewan. So yeah, I mean, a lot of talk with the Argonauts and them going for a second straight first place finish has been around McLeod Bethel Thompson, Curly Gittins Jr. Of course, they've had the injury with Andrew Harris and some moving parts in the backfield there, but their defense has carried them to a couple key victories this season. So, maybe if this Lions offense, like we're saying, a bit more suited to Vernon Adams Jr., like Nathan Rourke's ability to run and throw the deep ball, maybe a chance to put up some points. But Toronto's been a very tough team at home as well. So it's a lot of fascinating aspects with this matchup, and a long week of practice will no doubt do both teams good as far as recovering from those ailments. But we shall see who's on the final rosters come Friday morning.
Big time, yeah. These are two defenses featured in this game Saturday afternoon that are number 1 and 2 in opponents' offensive points allowed. So that's a big matchup to watch. It's been tough for offenses to score on us, but also Toronto too. And like you said, Toronto, they're only 4-3 at home this season. But years past, they've really, even though the crowd might not be there, they've been a tough team to beat at BMO Field there. So yeah, it's going to be a long trip too. We're still 5-1 on the road too, which is atop the CFL right now, actually, in terms of we're tied with Winnipeg for the only teams with one away loss this whole season too. So BC's been solid on the road this year. Toronto, like you said, going to be a tough challenge at home, and especially when I like what they can do on offense too with AJ Oleta at running back there too. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in person as well, and what our defense can do against Ouellette.
Talk more about this game with one of our favorites, first-time guest on the podcast, Matthew Scianitti from TSN. He'll be on the sidelines on Saturday. He was on the sidelines in Calgary, a rare trip out west for the sharp-dressed man. So we'll get his thoughts on that game, and I believe it's his second time with us this year. Way back in Week 4 in Ottawa, Mr. Scianitti was on the sidelines there. We, of course, don't go to Hamilton. And the famous John Liu was the guy in Montreal. So, normally some of those Eastern trips where we might get to see Mr. Scianitti just the 2 times this year. It's coming up next on First and Now, the official Lions podcast. And we head to Toronto now, a few days ahead of time. Lions and Argonauts Saturday. One of our good friends. I always love the chance running into him 2 or 3 times a year. Got to get him out to Vancouver one of these days, though. Farhan Lalji has that situation locked down, of course. But
Farhan
Matthew Scianitti,
and I could be on the sidelines, Matt. I mean, you got to take that up with the mayor of Vancouver, Farhan Lalji. I would absolutely love to come to BC, please.
I think it's now actually the mayor of Lyndon, Washington, but similar pull, yeah.
Yeah, we won't get into the cross border man, Mr. Lalji. No.
Leave that for another podcast. Matt Scianitti with us, TSN, a sideline reporter, CFL on TSN. He's heading to Qatar in about a month's time. Canada in the FIFA World Cup, so he's going to be racking up those air miles. And wanted to get you on. We love talking football with you, but we figured it was fitting this week with you handling the assignment at BMO Field. You, of course, were in Calgary on the weekend. Not the result the Argonauts wanted. Ultimately, had some injury problems, maybe played a role. But your overall assessment of that Argonauts loss in Calgary, dropping them to 8-7 on the year.
Ryan Dinwiddie said it best. I mean, he I think it was surprising and undoubtedly disappointing. And I think it from a number of perspectives. One, obviously, to lose Shane Ray to what the Argos suspect will be a torn pec, but maybe more significantly to lose Wynton McManus early, who's such a key part of the Argos defense, who has been a revelation for them, been a leader for them. Really, I think you can legitimately say in the East a potential most outstanding defensive player nominee. To lose him to what Dinwiddie suspected might be an MCL injury, that's a significant blow for the Argos. And irrespective of the fact that the Argos have been, certainly in the last couple of weeks, gaining a lot of momentum in the East, to lose those key defenders, one on your defensive line, the other in your linebacking core, is going to affect any team. Now, you did see Henoch Muamba step up and get 2 picks, but it certainly is a worry. And then, of course, undoubtedly, McLeod Bethel Thompson, as he said after the game, will not look back fondly on that game film. Calgary came at them. It's funny. I was speaking to Calgary defensive coordinator Brent Munson before the game, and he said our acronym is RTB, run to the ball. And certainly, Lions fans know the kind of pressure and consistency that the Stamps defense was looking to apply in this latter half of the season as they make their own playoff push, as the Lions have to try to get home field in the first round at the very least. And that Cameron Judge pick six was a real backbreaker for the Argos at the end of the game. So, beyond that, now the Argos are dealing with a lot of pressure. Montreal, on their own win streak, is right behind them. And if there's anyone you don't want to see in your rear view mirror, it's Trevor Harris and his offense when he gets humming. I mean, he has a reputation in this league for just the kind of efficiency that he can build, and it seems to be happening that way in Montreal right now. But overall, very, very disappointing performance from the Argos on the weekend.
Yeah, Nick and I hit on it off the top. Lions Argos, two sort of different looking teams from when they last met in week 3. Of course, it's not going to be Nathan Rourke. Brian Burnham's out. We suspect Lucky is going to get a week off and make sure he's healed and ready to go for the playoffs and the final stretch drive. But what's the most intriguing part of this matchup, sir, when you handicap it from that perspective? Maybe some guys going to be playing in different spots.
I don't mean to be generic in saying this, but I guess with the specter of Bo Levi Mitchell kind of hanging in the air, more for the Argos than the Lions, it's incredibly significant for McLeod Bethel Thompson. And also for Vernon Adams Jr. as well, because we're now into the last, 3-4 games here. And if you're McLeod Bethel Thompson, you have to be thinking that even what do I have to do for people, not for people to believe in me necessarily, but to get that consistency, because the Argos offense can really tease you. It can be multiple. He doesn't have one guy that he goes to. He can hit you with Curly Gittins Jr. He can hit you with Tavares Daniels. AJ Ouellette certainly can be efficient in the run game. But then all of a sudden you think they got a deep play to Brandon Banks over the middle, and they miss it by that much, and they don't necessarily put the foot down on opposing defenses. And just knowing John Bowman, the defensive line coach for the Lions, as I do, knowing what they saw last week in Calgary from what the Argos didn't necessarily deal with, it is going to be a lot of pressure coming at McLeod Bethel Thompson. So I'm looking at both guys. And for Vernon Adams Jr., it is, much like McLeod, been the perpetual discussion about, we see the great aspects of Vernon and the dynamic play that he can have, but it is incredibly disappointing not to be without Brian Burnham and potentially Lucky Whitehead. So that means, does Vernon feel like he has to do, and Vernon has talked about this several times to me and to others, feel like he has to do more than he has to? Does he feel like he has to force the play downfield? How does he approach, an Argos defense that now has lost 2 significant pieces? So this is an opportunity for both quarterbacks, and they have to step up, because Calgary's now nipping at the Lions' heels for a home playoff game, and the Argos know that they want to be hosted. They want the East to go through Toronto. So McLeod Bethel Thompson, he has to step up, but he's been doing that all season. He'd be the first to tell you that. But I'm looking at that quarterback matchup to be generic, but the thing is, those 2 guys have to step up because we are in the stretch drive right now.
And overall this season, we've seen, if you want to rank teams through the tiers, there's kind of been the top tier of Winnipeg, Calgary. I would say the BC Lions belong in that top tier too. But then there's Toronto, and they've been atop the East Division. They're 8-6 right now. They played Winnipeg very close, 2 wins over Saskatchewan, but then they have bad losses against the Lions. They have bad losses against the Stampeders. So in your mind, what's your overall read on where this Argos team belongs? Is it that top tier, or is it just below?
I think it's just below. I think the Argos, and they would admit this probably themselves, have been inconsistent. Ryan Dinwiddie has said before that he took a lot of lessons from last year's, what the Argos did last year in getting to the East Final and then losing, obviously, that second half disappointment to the Ticats. But the East really has been there for the taking all year. Obviously, we're seeing what's going on with Ottawa and the coaching change they just made. Hamilton, I can probably say of any other team in the East, has been the disappointment this year, because so much was expected of a team that went to back-to-back Grey Cups and then put Dane Evans as their number one player, but hasn't been able to get certainly injuries. They've dealt with a number of injuries in Hamilton. And then Montreal, and putting so much faith into Vernon Adams Jr. and then the changes that they had with Kahari Jones and Danny Machocha coming in. So the Argos were the model of stability because they had said McLeod Bethel Thompson's going to be our guy. And we have Ryan Dinwiddie. We're bringing Corey Mace as our defensive coordinator. And yet they show you flashes of, certainly, you take a look at that win that they had against Saskatchewan in Atlantic Canada was an example of, how they can adjust to certain situations. But it hasn't been, something that they've consistently put together. And outside of, certainly BC has shown, notwithstanding the disappointment of losing Nathan Rourke, that they can still build on the depth of talent that they have. And Calgary now coming on, notwithstanding the fact that they have apparently moved on from Bo Levi Mitchell and now are putting a lot of their faith in Jake Mayer. But everyone is chasing Winnipeg, and the one thing Winnipeg is they are a model of consistency. Irrespective of the fact that they may not be as dominant on defense, or at least showing that as they have in years past, irrespective of the fact that they have had their own injuries, not having Greg Ellingson and then having Dalton Schoen step up. That's consistency. That's depth. And the Argos, they want to be that team. They feel they have a Grey Cup. They feel they have a Grey Cup caliber team. They feel like they have a Grey Cup caliber defense. And yet they have dealt with, certainly their own setbacks and losing Andrew Harris and still being able to roll along in certain situations on offense. And then they have a stinker. I was walking past the Argos locker room in Calgary just on the weekend, and you overhear McLeod Bethel Thompson break the team down saying, I won't use the adult language that he used, mind you, but saying that he's built for this kind of adversity. Well, they have to show it now because they're going to the playoffs. Irrespective of if they lose that place to Montreal, they're likely going to, with a crossover, host a playoff game. So there are things to build on, but you don't want to back into the playoffs, especially knowing that, listen, again, I talk about the specter of Bo Levi Mitchell, and I'm not insinuating that there's been any talks between the Argos and the Stampeders, but if you're McLeod Bethel Thompson, this is your opportunity not only to show that you're the guy, but to lead a team potentially to a Grey Cup appearance. And there's a lot of guys on this team defensively who, Enoch Mwamba, again, has wanted that chance to be on a winning team that gets to, again, to a Grey Cup appearance. I mean, there are leaders on this team who think themselves, and speaking to Joshua Bell, he thinks he's got an incredible secondary that can take a team to a Grey Cup. And yet, as I've said, in terms of the offense, the whole Argos team teases you, and then there will be moments where you're just like, is this team for real? And when Ryan Dinwiddie is telling you that he might have thought about putting Chad Kelly in, well, now we're talking about, a team. Are they as confident in their offense and in their pivot? I'm not insinuating that there's a short leash on McLeod Bethel Thompson, but when a coach is thinking that in a situation where it is a big game against Calgary, it shows you that, hey, maybe they're going to make not a drastic change, but maybe they're saying, hey, listen, if it's not going well, we're going to make changes because we want to build on that momentum. So as much as the Argos are in that, the driver's seat at this point, with certainly if they win their games out, they're going to go ahead and host the East Final. It's not a team without questions.
And even with their inconsistencies, Toronto that being, do you believe they're the most dangerous team in the East right now, or do you think that's maybe Montreal with their win streak, or Hamilton, if they could pull out a win, can even maybe sneak into the playoffs this week? Who in your mind is the most dangerous team?
Hamilton has a huge game, right? I mean, basically their playoffs are this week against Saskatchewan. I mean, this is it. And if they beat Saskatchewan, a team that they're literally chasing, then it's all things are back on the table. And the Ticats, they've kind of, rope-a-dope is not the right word, but I mean, I think everyone is still kind of looking at that game against Winnipeg as an aberration, because we all saw that game, saw what Dane Evans did and what that offense did, and thought, if this Ticats team plays like this against the rest of the teams down the stretch, they are going to be a threat in the playoffs. And yet they haven't been able to do that. They've chopped and changed and altered and traded to find a stable defensive line, and it hasn't worked. And another key absence for them has been Simone Lawrence. I mean, Simone Lawrence's injuries has removed that kind of defensive presence for them on the back end, and that's tough. I mean, they've got so many. They have themselves a really talented secondary, But to be without Simone Lawrence, I'm not dismissing what Javon Santos Knox can do as a leader in that defense, but Simone is Hamilton through and through, and you can't really put a price on, you can't weigh the absence of a player like that. And then moving on to Montreal, certainly have to give credit to Danny Machocha and his staff for making the decision to move on from Kahari Jones and putting their faith in Trevor Harris. But the one thing about Trevor Harris that, maybe saying he's underappreciated is probably a stretch, but this is a guy who took the Ottawa Redblacks to a Grey Cup 4 years ago, right? And was part of a team, an Edmonton team that walked into Montreal that had all of this momentum and beat the Als in a playoff game in Montreal. He's dangerous, and as much as there's always that kind of talk about, Trevor Harris in the playoffs, like, especially in semifinals, is a dangerous player who, when he gets going, is almost unstoppable in terms of making completions. So I always look at that kind of veteran presence when weighing it against, even, yes, Dane Evans has been to 2 Grey Cup appearances, and yes, McLeod Bethel-Thompson has a big arm, and I look at Trevor Harris is a guy who can be dangerous. So I would probably pick the Als at this point, only because you look at their receiving corps. Look at the kind of catches that Gino Lewis is making. And yeah, Jake Winicki hasn't had the year that we would all expect him to have. But if he gets going, that's a dangerous team. So the Argos have all the talent, and they've got first place for a reason. But if they let up, the Als will gladly go ahead and take an East final in Montreal. Because I've been in Montreal, especially recently, albeit they lost to Edmonton, but it rocks in Montreal when they've got a playoff game, and that would be a difficult environment for anybody, especially, Argos out of the equation. If it's a crossover team or even if it's Hamilton, that's a tall task.
Yeah, Toronto, Montreal go back-to-back to end, right? So props to the schedule makers. I know Saskatchewan, Calgary, back-to-back as well. I don't know how much meaningful those will be now, but it's going to be a fun final 4 weeks here, Matt.
Well, it's coincidental, right? Because out here in Ontario, about a month ago, we were like, why are the Argos and Ticats playing 4 times in 5 weeks?
Yeah.
Right? So it's the schedule. Getting back to the 18-game schedule has had some oddities, but certainly when you look at the Argos and the Als having to kind of battle it out, and the fact that those last 2 games are going to be that you're absolutely right, Baker. That is pretty cool.
And while we're on the topic of sidelines and big games, how much fun are you having? Clearly you have fun with it. I know you're always, you got the sneakers going. You and Farhan are going back and forth about the legitimacy of having an umbrella if it's raining. Should you actually do that? You look like you're having fun out there every time we see you, and on TV or in person. How much are you enjoying it?
You know what? I feel very privileged to do the job I do. I've been at TSN for 10 years. This is also my 10th season. Obviously when you take out the missed COVID year, my 10th season covering the Canadian Football League. The CFL has been a family I never knew I needed, and it's been a real pleasure for me, to interact with guys like you, to interact with fans, and that really is the crux of what we do on the CFL on TSN, and it's a broadcast that I think we try to open up to hundreds of thousands of our closest friends, and it's hard to say that, with sports as it is, and this big machine and big circus that we call professional sports. It's so cool to be able to have a community of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Canadians who just love football, and even though there's passions on every side, like every fan appreciates every fan. And what I don't take for granted is I've spent 9 years on the sidelines for TSN, and I've done, I've been in the middle of the Labor Day Classic between the Argos and the Ticats, and always appreciated that people knew I was going to be, fair, and never really picking a side, and be able to interact with both sets of players and every organization, and for people to know that I'm here because I'm passionate about the league and passionate about the stories that this league tells. So, my shoes have always been, you can call it a coming into TV from the National Post, maybe my own personal security blanket. The fact that it's kind of taken on a life of its own is a real privilege for me. And to know also that I've had some of my most amazing experiences in television, from catching a pass to dropping a pass to being on the sidelines and sharing them with Sarah Oleski at 5 Grey Cups. I mean, that's the stuff later on in my life, I'll look back and be like, wow, I got to do that. And it's a real, it is a real pleasure for me to do that. And although, I won't be able to be there and be there this November, knowing that I'm going to Qatar to cover our Canadian men's national team, I will be disappointed, because not to be at a Grey Cup is a disappointment. So it makes me even more excited to know that 2023 will be there, and to be back with that football family I have. But it's to be able to talk CFL football, to be able to interact with fans, to interact with passionate members of organizations like the Lions, and you two, Nick and Matt, is just my pleasure.
Well, very well said, and that's the great thing about this. People who are involved in this league, whether it's team, broadcast, behind the scenes, in front of the camera, everyone you run into is passionate about this league and wants to see it succeed. So that's very well said, and continued success. Nick, the floor is yours if you had another one.
I was just going to say, at least they're not missing the cold in Regina.
Hey, I did that in 2013. I did it in 2013.
That's
and very
right.
Quick story. That was my first Grey Cup for TSN. I didn't do the sidelines then, but I was one of our executive producers. I had never been to Regina or Moose Jaw, which is where the two practice facilities were. And I was doing a stand-up outside, and it was the notorious. We had a 45 or 50 below day, and I was doing a stand-up. And I was doing the stand-up, and my top lip split open and started to bleed. I didn't notice it until we'd actually sent that and it went to air. And one of our executive producers was like, "You know why I loved your stand-up?" And I'm young, new to TV. I was like, "Why?" He goes, "Because I knew how cold you were." So I will miss being in the cold in Regina. And I haven't had I've been to every stadium in this league, but I have yet to beat a new Mosaic. So. I regret that. It is now the only stadium I haven't set foot in or done a broadcast in. So yeah, I hope I get the opportunity. I'm hoping I'm lucky enough to get the opportunity, but I will miss Regina. I will miss a Pilsner or two. But knowing the heartland of Canadian football, I imagine I'll be back there sometime soon.
Yeah, well, knock on wood. If we're there, God willing, we'll be sure to send you daily weather reports.
I know you will, Baker. I know you will be sending me those daily Pilsner reports and weather reports.
Perhaps. Yeah, perhaps. You never know. There's a good chance. Hey, my friend, listen, continued success, and we will see you Saturday.
See you, boys. Travel safe.
Thanks,
Matthew
Matt.
Scianitti. Matthew Scianitti from the Mothership, TSN. Great stuff with the one and only Matt Scianitti from TSN. Looking forward to see him, and always good talking Canadian football with him. Carved a nice little career for himself on the sidelines. So good times with Matthew indeed, and we look forward to seeing him on Saturday. Lions Argonauts. Nick, believe that's the second game of the week, second or third. See, I'm so well prepared here. It's not like I had the schedule. Second game, as we're going to go around the CFL now. Talk about huge implications, Nick. A Friday night just down the road from us. We may have to go down to Steeltown on Friday night. Saskatchewan in Hamilton, Nick. And looking at the implications here, Rough Riders can now only qualify for the playoffs via a crossover. But even that's not a guarantee. Hamilton 4 points back of the Rough Riders. A tie-cat win here, and it's game on. All Hamilton would have to do is finish tied with the fourth-place team in the West, and there would be no crossover. So maybe an early one with playoff implications down in Hamilton on Friday evening.
Oh, for sure. It's almost do or die for Sask at this point, with 2 games against Calgary looming to end out their season. So Hamilton's looked pretty steady as of late. We didn't see them last week, but we did see them 3 weeks ago have their best outing of the year against Winnipeg, and they played Montreal pretty tough 2 weeks ago and ended up ultimately coming a little short in that one. And right now, there's not much to be inspired about with Saskatchewan. They kind of kept it close in Winnipeg. They showed moments, but then it was turnovers, just pretty much ruining any momentum they had against the Bombers, and ultimately leading to their third loss against Winnipeg this season. So it's going to be interesting because both teams should be pretty desperate in this one on Friday night. The home field should prevail Hamilton to a victory here in my mind, but I wouldn't be surprised if Saskatchewan gives it one last kind of ditch effort to like you said, potentially cross over now as that's their only option.
Again, Hamilton 4 points back at 4-10. So a Saskatchewan win here, and they would just need to split with Calgary in their final two to lock it up. But a Hamilton win, and it's must-win territory pretty much here for the Rough Riders. Interesting little storyline in these last 4 weeks. Will there be a Saskatchewan crossover or not? Lions and Argonauts, 1 o'clock Pacific, like we've been teeing up here. After us, as we're flying out, Edmonton at Winnipeg, 4 o'clock Pacific time. And the Elks loss, and they would be eliminated from a crossover position. Very, very, very small crack in Edmonton's playoff door remains open, but they're very much in tough here as the Blue Bombers. Here's a scenario where Winnipeg could clinch first place if we don't win in Toronto, and then Winnipeg takes care of business against Edmonton. Bombers will host Edmonton, have a bye, then come here next week, then a bye in between our final meeting with them to wrap things up in Winnipeg. So you've seen this Edmonton Elks team fight hard. I thought for sure they were in a position to finally get that home win, but unfortunately was the Beverett pick six kind of put a whole damper on that. Is Edmonton cursed at home, Nick? They could be, but
I mean, at
pretty
this
much
point,
playing for some. Yeah, pretty much playing for pride at this point. Again, it's very, very small possibility they could end up in the playoffs, but they pretty much have to win and have Saskatchewan keep losing. But we'll see how Chris Jones has his troops rallied up.
Mm-hmm. Well, my bias storyline in this game is it's some help that we need. We if we want to catch Winnipeg, we can do it ourselves. But if Edmonton can help us out, that's huge for our hopes in getting that Western Final playoff game at home. But yeah, the Elks, they lost Kenny Lawler, unfortunately, for the remainder of the season. So that's going to be a tough loss as they're already down a couple of receivers on the season. And now they got to head into IG Field for what looks to be a tough battle. And Winnipeg's also making some moves in their secondary too. They acquired Alden Darby this morning. They reacquired him actually because he won the Grey Cup with them last season over Hamilton, which was the team that he elected to sign with this year and is now, funny enough, back in Winnipeg. But because Winnipeg's secondary, they've been getting exploited in these past couple games. So they have had Demario Houston and Nick Taylor go down with long-term injuries. So not surprised to see Winnipeg look for help in that position. Especially when we've seen teams like even Saskatchewan is moving the ball quite well on them last week. Just ultimately the turnovers, they forced getting them back into that blowout territory. But Winnipeg's offense, again, they didn't do a whole lot against the Elks the first time they met, but I would expect it to be a little bit of a different story here with Collaros, Schoen, Rashid Bailey, Nick Dembski all clicking in full force right now.
Yeah, Dalton Schoen very briefly had the CFL receiving lead before Dominique Rhymes passed him against Ottawa. Correct one thing, Nick. Technically, I don't think we can get any help in this game. Lions have to beat Winnipeg twice, regardless, to get first place. I know what you're saying, but Lions win out, they would get first place because it would involve 2 wins over the Blue Bombers. Winnipeg's at 13-2 their last 2 games against us. But I get what you're saying. So the scoreboard watching there, kind of, we don't have to stress over it, is what I'm saying. It's kind of nice. Still very much.
Maybe the mental side of things. Winnipeg's coming to us after a loss against Edmonton. They're not feeling so hot. That could play a role.
Or they could be really pissed off, and one of the two.
And overthink
I don't want to look ahead. But next week, next Saturday, October 15th, BC Place, Lions Bombers, potentially a shot at first place, staying alive for first place, and setting up a big one there at the end. Oh, juicy storylines. And nothing on Sunday, but we have the old Thanksgiving Turkey Day game. I think there was a doubleheader last Thanksgiving. But this time it is the Ottawa Redblacks led by interim head coach Bob Dice. Paul Lapalisse, of course, relieved of his duties after the loss here. Ottawa hosting Montreal. Hey, we can do the Alouettes a favor on Saturday, Nick. If we take care of the Argonauts, then Montreal would be in a position to tie them for first place. Alouettes 7-7, Toronto 8-6, Ottawa 3-11, most likely playing out the string now. But a little Turkey Day football between the Alouettes and the Red Blacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned the big change with the Red Blacks. Unfortunately, something probably had to change with that team, just given how their win-loss record has shaped up over these past 2 seasons. But they're still pretty competitive. They played. I thought we talked about it earlier a bit, but even though the score was 34-19, I thought they played us pretty well. Nick Arbuckle at quarterback looks pretty competent for them. So I wouldn't expect them not to be shut out against the Owls or the Owls to run away with it, like maybe some might expect. But that said, the Owls have been playing really good, and especially on defense, they've been playing really well lately. Put a couple string of games here together that have been very well in their favor on defense. Michael Always, one player, has been playing pretty well. Beverett, as you mentioned, had the pick 6 last week to give them the win. But they've also made some nice trades, like Nephius Lyon in that secondary from Edmonton. So I'm interested to see if Montreal can keep this momentum up heading down the stretch here.
That game in Montreal, by the way, I may have said Ottawa there a minute ago. Molson Stadium on Thanksgiving. That one, there you go, 10 a.m. Pacific time. Get up early while you're making your turkey and your Brussels sprouts. You big Brussels sprouts guy? I don't want to turn this into a Thanksgiving food debate, but it has to be asked. I like them personally.
I don't think about Brussels sprouts when I think of Thanksgiving. No, that's how I'll answer that.
Cranberry sauce?
I'm assuming
yes
you are.
No?
Cranberry sauce? No.
I am.
Yeah, so
That's
we're opposite.
a hard no from me. No.
What about?
I'm no cranberry sauce. I like Brussels sprouts, but not cranberry sauce. We don't like. Yeah. Thanksgiving. The cool part about Canadian Thanksgiving is these games are really heating up. Something's cooking. Pardon the pun. Playoff races are cooking. Yes? No? My sister once told me that puns are the lowest form of humor, and I kind of tend to agree. But anyway, moving right along. This was a fun time today. Matthew Scianitti, always good. Lions Argos, 1 o'clock pregame at noon, AM 730. Moj and Julio on the Lions Audio Network, AM 730, home of Lions football. BCLions.com will have all the previews, all the game content, pregame, postgame. Podcast is at First and Now on Twitter. I'm at Bakes Takes 84. He is at Nick_Kowalski. No C. Correct?
Correct.
All right, big boy. Load up your iPad and get your Kindle all ready with all your books. We have a long flight on Friday. This is going to be fun.
Just a laptop for me, and I'll have it loaded up.
There you go. Rodent 5. Get it going. We wish all our fans, listeners, viewers here a happy Thanksgiving. You and your loved ones stay safe, and we will talk to you next week on First and Now, the official Lions podcast.